Alrighty, thank you for being at this session. I hope that you find it entertaining. Please, at the end, do not forget to fill out the registration forms. The evaluation forms. And I think we still have some people cruising in, but let's go ahead and get started. This session is entitled Migrating from SBS to Whatever's Next. And the reason it's entitled that is that there's a little bit of confusion in the market about what's next. So we'll go into that. I'm going to go at lightning speed. I have 7 hours and 14 minutes worth of presentation and not enough time to cover that. So trust me, we've worked a way around that. We're going to talk about what was old and what's new, how we're going to get from here to there. We're going to cover a lot of material. What we're not going to cover is all the stuff about pricing and some of the specific questions that are covered in a lot of the other sessions. We're not going to cover licensing. My goal is to give you a few tools, a whole bunch of resources, and an overview of the process of getting off of SBS, off of what we have traditionally been selling in our market. My name is Carl. I'm one of the instructors for the Pocket MBA program. If you haven't checked it out, please do so. If nothing else, you get a very cool laptop bag with a laptop with Windows 8. So there you go. And then you get lots and lots of education in, big blocks of time so that you have enough time to actually integrate it into what you're doing in your business. So check that out at mypocketmba.com. I'm an author and a blogger and a speaker and a trainer, and I do other things. I have been and am working in an ISP. I started my business in 1995, and so I've been doing this. I do what you do. We still do migrations all the time, but we found more and more that we're migrating people off of one set of products and onto a different set of products. So that's what we're going to talk about. Please download these slides. What you're going to find is that what we go through today, I'm not going to read the 218 links that I give you, but when you download it, there are step-by-step instructions. I'm not going to read the screen, so we're going to go through it, but this is click-by-click. At one point, we're going to go through the click-by-click of moving off of SBS and onto a standalone server. We're also going to give you all the resources of where you go on Microsoft to find out about this and that and the other thing and these tools and so forth. So please download these slides. It is a resource for you to take with you. Pardon me? From SMBNation. Somehow, somewhere, somebody other than me will make those available to you. And if they don't, email me, and my PayPal address is, no, I'm kidding. So we've, at this interesting point, something happened in the last few months in our community and worldwide. And by our community, I mean the people who have built their businesses around Small Business Server and the community that supports Small Business Server. So relax. It's all going to be over soon. There was this huge cry when Microsoft announced that the SBS was end of life. And people literally like, oh, I don't know what to do. I built my business on this. People in some countries actually were saying, there's no one in our country who needs a product that's bigger than 75 licenses. We just don't have that many big businesses. Many people said, well, we don't have the bandwidth. Many people said, well, we don't have the technology. Like, we can't get that. My clients aren't going to buy that. And there's lots and lots and lots of confusion. So part of what you need to do is figure out as business people, how do you move to the next level? What is the next big thing? A bit of an eye chart, but this is the lineup of SBS products and what was included in each of them as we went over time. And what you see is, starting in 2000, it took off. In 2003, it got extremely robust. How many people in this room thank Microsoft every day that 2003 gave you 5 years of amazing sales and the ability to build your business on a rock-solid product? That's a lot of people. Now, for me, the thing I love most about 2003 is it was absolutely robust, and I could do anything I wanted to. But then we got to a period where we're putting more and more and more onto that box, and at the same time, other services came up, and they became very complicated. For example, Exchange became very complicated, and a lot of people are like, man, You know, I don't know how to do anything without just this little piece. And so they're thinking, I need alternatives to Exchange. There are people who are doing off-site backup, so they don't need the backup to be built onto the system, so forth and so on. Finally, we get down to 2011 Essentials and 2012 Essentials, where you get a server, you get remote access, you got 25 licenses. It doesn't include Exchange, doesn't include Outlook, right? You can't even load Exchange onto it. So the assumption is you're going to pair this with something else. Or you're going to move from one of these SBS products, 11 Standard or Premium, 2008, 2003, and you're going to separate out the products. You're going to put in a server with SQL, you're going to put in a server with Exchange, you're going to put in a server for file storage. How many of you have clients who are going to go out and pay $5,000 to $7,000 a piece for 3 servers? 2 people, that's awesome. One of them is kidding. So we got to figure out what's next, because Essentials is a very cool thing, and we've built a huge business on installing Essentials and Foundation Server, but there are other things as well. So we're going to first start at Microsoft-centric options, okay? Over on the left is what's included in SBS, right? You get server, SQL, Exchange, so forth, and I include the premium stuff, the second server. Now, there are cloud options. You can go buy cloud storage from many, many people. You can buy cloud backup from many, many people. So it's not that you have to buy them from the Office 365 product line. There are lots of people selling this stuff. And then in the cloud, you can put up whatever you want. But you can also put up things on the in-house box. On Essentials, you're limited to certain things with only 25 users. Foundation Server we love, absolutely love. If you've got small clients and they truly need terminal services, that's the product for you. You got Active Directory on site, you got storage on site, you can put your line of business application on it. You can put that thing on, you know, a DL580 if you want. Or you can put it on a tiny little box that costs 320 bucks. So it's very flexible in terms of what you can put it on, and it will run terminal services. Now, it has some upper limits in terms of processing power and memory, but it's an awesome product for really small businesses. And many of us look around and we say, you know what? I got a whole bunch of businesses with 15 to 20 users, so I'm good to go. And then the other thing is you could put in the full-blown server 2012. You can put in the standard server, and if you're doing that, then you need the skill set we're going to talk about at the end, which is how do I go from the old SBS environment and separate out the server and the file storage, and then the Exchange is going to be over here. How do I get that other server in place? And the way my business works, we assume we're going to do this with 0 downtime. So we're going to assume that we are never going to be in a situation where the client's down or we can't go backwards. So that's a key piece of what we do. So we sell a thing, this is a sample of what we sell, and we call it Server Lite. Server Lite is sold with a small box, either that Essentials box or the Foundation server on site, and we pair it with some cloud services. So you got Exchange in the cloud, and you've got on site just a handful of things that need to be really fast. You've got, you know, your QuickBooks files are on site, okay? And so people can get file storage on site, they've got the remote access if they need it, and they have, the Active Directory is on site. But then Exchange is in the cloud. This is how I operate both of the companies. The company that I own, the company that Mike owns. We have nothing on site except one little machine that runs QuickBooks, and it gets backed up to the cloud. All of our storage is in the cloud. We have a map drive in the cloud, and there's nothing within the company. So when I open my laptop or my desktop at home or my machine at the office, how I connect to my data is exactly the same on all of them. How I connect to my Exchange is exactly the same on all of them. It's a very robust system. It's very light. It doesn't cost very much money, and we can sell the heck out of it because it just works. Yes, sir?
Carl, did you stop selling SBS 2011?
When did I stop selling 20? Have I stopped SBS 2011? No. So strategically, I will sell SBS 2011 until December 31st of next year because it's good for 3 to 5 years. We like people to replace their systems every 3 years, but there's no reason that SBS 2011 is not a spectacular product. And the key thing, that the argument that you have to make sure your clients understand is, it's not like this is a specific different thing. SBS 2011 is server. It is Exchange. It is SQL. It's not like they took these things and it's crippleware or anything like that. If you know anything about how SBS team works, or used to work, they're all on vacation now, they have to wait until SQL is done, wrapped in plastic and delivered to them, and it's their job to write the wizards to make it work with everything else. They have to wait till Exchange is done. They have to wait till server is done. And their job is to make it all work together. But the SBS team does not control how Exchange works or what the wizards look like. The SBS team doesn't control SQL or even the file storage system. That is handed to them, and then they have to make it work together. The result is, if you understand server, if you've gotten under the hood a little bit, you understand the server going forward. You may not understand the transition from point A to point B, from the packaged product to the standalone product, but that's just a skill set that has been out there for a long time, and you can learn it. You learn this, right? I mean, you think about, this is the 10th SMBNation. What were you selling 10 years ago? I know you weren't selling even SBS 2003 because it wasn't out yet. So we've gone through these generations of products, and you've learned every one of them. All you have to learn now is a tiny little, I'm going to call it a fix-up, going from this set of products to this set of products. The products are the same, it's just how they're packaged is going to be different. So you have to learn the unbundling skills. So I have no problem selling SBS 2011 if it's the right product for that client. But we have lots and lots of clients that they got 5 to 10 desktops. We knock these things out all the time. I mean, the first thing we did to get into cloud services, we looked at our own client list and we said, how many of them can we put on that? And I think it's about a third of the clients, just like that. We went to them and said, do you want to buy a new server at $7,000 plus that $7,000 in labor to set it up? Or we can do this. And they all said, let's do that, especially in the middle of a recession. All right. So this is a list that, and it may be incomplete, you may have other things you do in your business, but these are services that you provide to your clients with regard to technology. So you need Active Directory, you need a router and a firewall and a switch and DHCP and DNS and all this kind of stuff. The ones in yellow might be on SBS. They got a little thing in the corner. They might be on SBS. So you have to choose where you're going to put them. Are you going to put them on site? Are you going to put them on a cloud server, on a cloud service, right? And the difference is the internet-based service is going to be, for example, Salesforce.com, right? It exists only in the cloud. QuickBooks Online exists only in the cloud, right? It's not something that you go buy QuickBooks Online or you go buy Salesforce. You don't do that. It only exists in the cloud. The hosted cloud services would be, for example, selling Exchange mailboxes one by one. Hosted cloud servers would be, here's a hosted Exchange server. Okay, again, those are just things you need to learn, but a server might cost you $350 to $500 a month. That's for one group of clients. Mailboxes at $7 or $8 a piece would be something you would sell to a different client. If somebody only needs 5 mailboxes, it's going to be hard to sell them the $350 a month. If somebody's got 100 mailboxes, it's going to be hard to sell them these things, which with your markup are $15 a piece. Holy smokes, right? You have to figure out what's right for the client. And some things are not in the cloud. They are physical. They have to exist in that client's office, either because the processing power has to be local, or the storage has to be local, or there are issues with regard to private data, all kinds of things. One of our clients that I love to use as an example is a patent attorney, right? He deals with intellectual property, and he's never putting anything in the cloud. Period, end of story. We're lucky he uses email. Okay, so we're going to look at a click-by-click of moving from SBS to Server 2012, okay, to the standard server environment. Note that we are not using the Server 2012 migration wizard. 2 key reasons for this. One, it is destructive of the old system. Right? The first thing in the instructions at the end of the resource section slides you're going to see is, before you do this, have a really good backup because we're going to destroy your old machine. So if anything goes wrong, you are SOL. Okay? So that's not good for us. Second is, obviously, there's downtime, right? Minor third note, Microsoft has this thing with wizards that they think that what you want is the black screen to appear with no timer and no indicator, and it's just going to sit there until it's done. And you have to believe at some point that it hasn't frozen up and that it's going to finish. And so you just drink a lot of coffee and shake and sweat and wait. And I'm not interested in that. So I shake enough already. So the good news is that moving from one of these services, the bundled service, to the standalone is not difficult. It's something you can do. And a lot of the stuff that has made migration difficult, it's made, there are people in this industry who make money selling other people information about how to migrate their services. Can you believe that? So I'm one of them and Jeff is the other one. With this, there's almost no user migration because what you're going to do is you're going to actually take a standard Microsoft process that has existed for 15 years to take this Active Directory and move it over here, and it just keeps going and it keeps working, and there's zero downtime, and nothing gets lost, dropped, or forgotten. You don't have to reattach the computers, right? It's just part of the process. And again, it may be a process that you haven't learned if you got in with Small Business Server and all you've sold is Small Business Server, and if you've never moved anybody off a Small Business Server, you don't know that lots of people do this every single day and have for many, many years. So it's not something new. This is old information. So you don't have to migrate those desktops. You don't have to migrate the users. There's just a handful of things you need to know about. It's all very familiar, and you just need to learn a couple of things, and life gets better and better. So here's some best practices. And some of these Microsoft has adopted. Some of them they have not yet adopted, but they will. So first of all, you're going to put DHCP on the firewall, so it's not on that server. This is a Microsoft best practice with the current technology. In my business, we're going to use a hosted spam filter. And the reason we use a hosted spam filter is all of that traffic takes place up in the cloud and not on my network. All of that processing time takes place up in the cloud and not on my network. And no matter what happens on my network, if my Exchange server goes down, blows up, the office is burned down, or there's a flood, clients don't get a bounce. The email sits up there waiting for me to collect it, and it's very, very easy to migrate. Obviously, we're going to document everything. Write down what you do, write down how you do it, write down what you did. Make sure that you get paid for everything you do. And before, during, and after the migration, you need to make sure that you know what your process is so you can replicate it. Sometimes what we do is not successful. And if you don't write it down, you don't know what not to do. Sometimes what we do is very successful. And if you write it down, you can replicate your success. It's one thing to say, I want to replicate the process. Really what you want to do is you want to replicate the success. So when you find something that works, you can keep fine-tuning it and fine-tuning it and fine-tuning it and making it more and more and more successful every time. Master DNS, domain name service, rules the universe. If you don't know DNS, go learn it. DNS has far more information in it besides first, second server, and gateway. If that's what you know about DNS, you need to go to school. You don't need to read the big fat book, but you need a good core understanding of DNS. Everything from, the internet down to your machine. You need to know what all of those pieces are and how all the components work. And it will help you solve many problems. Use a troubleshooting and repair log, what we call a TSR log. Troubleshooting and repair log, basically, it's a form that you buy from me that has a series of lines and a little thing where you put down the time. And you write something down every time something important happens or every 15 minutes, so that no matter what's going on, and the reason you have to buy it from me is it's got a copyright at the bottom. So do not use a blank yellow piece of paper that's lined. Absolutely do not do that, because I don't get any money off of that. Only Staples makes money off that. So basically, you write down what you did and the steps in which you did it, and that way you can document the order in which you did it. You can fine-tune your process, and you've got a permanent record of what you did and didn't do, which is huge when it comes to troubleshooting. Because when something does go wrong, you call somebody on the phone, they're going to say, okay, is the router plugged into the switch? is there a direct line? I don't want to hear that you've got something in between and they're reading off a script and they're turning pages. And you need to be able to say, look, here's the deal. I did this, 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 and this. I did it in this order. I did these 3 things first. I tried that. It didn't work. I went back. I did the other thing. If you demonstrate to them that you actually know what you're doing and you know the exact and precise order in which you did it, you can tell them, I will not repeat these steps just because you weren't on the phone the first time I did them. And when you talk to them at a much higher level and they understand that you know more than they do about the system you're sitting in front of, they will escalate you much more quickly and they will give you a higher level of support because you are not the person who said, okay, let me see if there's a cable plugged into the back of the computer, because I don't know that, right? When you step up, they will step up. So it makes your life a lot easier. Finally, we're going to reboot all machines get rebooted during what we call golden hours. This is the hour before the client's office opens in the morning, the hour after they close at night, and at noon. And we call those golden hours because it allows me to say that there's 0 downtime during business critical hours for all business critical systems. Okay, so my little caveat is, well, obviously sometime you have to reboot it. Okay, great. At noon, you kick everybody off and you can reboot it, and you still can say you had 0 downtime during business hours. But what's not on here is working between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. You do not have to work after 6 p.m. or before 7 a.m. unless you choose to. And you can argue with me all day long, but it is an absolute perfect fact. You don't have to do that. You choose to do that, and that's cool. That's your choice, but don't tell me you have to. Question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, maybe I missed it, but was putting DHCP on the firewall just a temporary solution?
No, DHCP lives on the firewall. That's what it's supposed to do. Don't put it anywhere else.
Okay, what about, I like it on the server, so you have a secure dynamic.
Okay, so when your server reboots, I can't get to the internet. Everybody in the company is down, right? You can have it dynamic on the firewall, and you can say, the server is hard-coded, these printers are hard-coded, you can have a range where desktops get this, you can do everything you need to do. The DHCP points to the server for DNS. Your DNS must all point to the server as the center of the universe. The server then goes out to Google's 8.8.8.8 or whatever, but it tells them where to get everything that's not on their own network. But the DHCP serves that DNS pointer to everybody in the network. Josh?
If DNS is through the server and there isn't a secondary, then you still lose your internet access effectively once that's...
Well, you can make the ISP as the secondary, right? So that what people get is, if I can't get to the server, I'm going to at least get to the ISP. Now I've still got internet access. Somebody over here?
That does cause some problems. There's some trade-offs there, but I've seen that scenario.
But I'm just telling you, for 5 years, Microsoft has recommended that that's the way you do it. And now, when you set up Essentials, it'll set up that firewall for you, and that's the way it's going to set it up. Somebody over here had a question.
He kind of asked the same question. I just don't see what you're accomplishing by putting DHCP on the firewall.
What I accomplished in the big picture, putting DHCP on the firewall, is uptime. Over the next 3 years, my life is easier if DHCP is on the firewall.
The assumption is the firewall as an appliance isn't going to be unavailable.
The what?
The firewall is the appliance. It's not going to be unavailable.
Right. So he's saying the firewall is an appliance. It's not going to be unavailable at any point as I do stuff with the server. All right. So we can argue with that offline, and you can buy me a beer tonight. So here's the big overview of how you get from SBS to standard server 2012, and this applies to any version of SBS in 2003, 8, 11. First, you join to the old domain. You make the server a domain controller. You expand the Active Directory schema. You migrate the FSMO roles. You migrate the data, and that's pretty much it. There's a few details we're going to go into, but big picture, that's as simple as it gets. Now, we're going to complicate it a little because we're going to go from 5 things here to 8 steps because we're going to tell you about robocopy. But basically, that's it. So if you look at the bottom here, we're going to move from doing a discovery of what you've got to moving Exchange and SharePoint up to the cloud. And when I have these little things in the middle that say time, the time is not specific. The time could be an hour, a week, a month. It doesn't matter. These things can all be separated in time. So if you ever read anything where Microsoft says that the limit on this is something, you can take a big fat marker and go, ee, 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 ee. The limit is what I decide to do because I'm in charge of this. Yes, sir?
Isn't there downtime when you're copying 75 gigs of Exchange?
No, there's no downtime when you copy 75 gigs of Exchange. Sorry, we'll go into detail, but no, of course there's not. So it's not, again, it's what we don't do, what we never do for any of this stuff is show up on Saturday, shut everything down, close down the company, and then move everything all at once and move it to the new systems, boot it all up, and hope it all works. We divide and conquer. We move every one of the services separately. We do them in a way so that none of them impacts the others. It's so easy to duplicate services today. It is 10 times easier to do this today than it was 10 years ago. So you just got to figure out how you're going to do it. So when you move Exchange and SharePoint to the cloud, that's literally like, that's a separate thing. There's a process there, and it can be done months before you do the rest of this. So now what you've got is an SBS server where it does not, it no longer has Exchange in-house. It no longer has SharePoint in-house. So it's not using those services. Then you set up the new server. You join it to the domain. Again, you can do that a month later. And it can just sit there for a while. And then you migrate the data. And again, you can do that a month later. You repoint the shares. And finally, you promote the new server and you remove the old server. Again, you can do that a month later. You can separate these as much as you want to guarantee that you're familiar and comfortable with the process and the client has zero downtime. So here's just a super quick overview of Exchange. Right now, if your email is delivered to a spam filter and it goes to the old SBS server, you literally set up your service wherever it is in the cloud. You set up with the domain, it's all ready, and all it wants to do is go ahead and start collecting that email. And then you point your spam filter to that, and from that moment on, all of your mail goes to the new server, right? Beautiful thing about the 21st century is that Outlook 2010 is included with all of the hosted Exchange mailboxes that you buy. So now your clients, even if they're running Office 2003, can step up and get Outlook 2010, which allows them to open 2 mailboxes on different domains at the same time. So now they can say, this one is your current live mailbox that's up there in the cloud, and this one is your old one, and until I get to your desktop and move this stuff for you, they're just gonna be different mailboxes, and everything comes in and out at the top, right? And if you want to, you can just drag and drop, and you can move it yourself, or you can wait for me. Obviously, we're going to do a process to clean up that mailbox, spit some stuff out to PST, archive some stuff, get it small. If you want to export it to a PST and import it, you can do it all from that machine. And by you, I mean you, the technician, can open up 10 different accounts on one Office Outlook at the same time. So you can have literally like 5 clients that you're migrating at the same time from one desktop where you've got them all open in Outlook. It is easy. It's a piece of cake. All you have to do is have a clear, precise process that you follow exactly so nothing goes wrong. You don't have to be a high-level engineer. You just have to be rigorous about having a process and following your process. So now we can turn off Exchange and SharePoint. So here's our click-by-click as we go from SBS to 2012. Step 1 is start a TSR log. You're going to log every single thing you do, especially if you're going to do this over several months. You might have a TSR log for every stage in the process. But you have to do it. You're going to install Server 2012. From there, there's a standard setup. You're going to use a static IP because I said so, and it makes life easy. You're going to join the client domain, but you're not going to use the SBS Wizard. There's certain things with the SBS Wizard that's going to bring over some code and some settings that you don't necessarily need. So since we're moving to a standalone environment, we're going to do it, the standalone way. For 10 years now, our mantra has been, run the wizard, om, 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 right? I'm sorry, you now have to unlearn the run the wizard, right? You need a new mantra, which is figure out how the big boys do it, and then we're going to do that. So you're going to join it. You've always been able to join a server to a domain without running the wizard. Now you're just going to, go under the sheets and go ahead and do it. Yes, sir? I'm sorry, I want to remove what?
That default login batch file for your administrator account, because the first time you log in, you'll get those SBS tools.
So he's saying you want to remove the automatic login script so that the administrator runs and does that. Yes, you're going to be careful about how you add this. Again, not running the wizard, but you can join a machine and not have it bring over all of the little SBS tools. And you're not going to run the little join thing. You're not going to do anything to make it part of the SBS part, only part of the domain. Okay, that's a piece of it. So, and here's the steps, click, 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 right? So from now on, you're only going to log on to this system as the domain administrator, not the local administrator. And again, it's one of these things, you got to go slow and you got to keep it in your mind, right? At this point, that machine has a local administrator. It might have a different password. But you're going to log on as the domain administrator. It is not currently a domain controller. So, you got to keep straight what's going on in your head. At some point, it becomes a domain controller, and, then it runs the universe. But you got to make sure that you're only logging on to the domain and as a domain administrator. So then you prep the new server for promotion, okay? Which means you're going to log on. You're going to click on the roles, and you're going to add the DNS role. You're going to add the file services role. You're going to add the remote desktop services role. And the main reason you're going to add the last one is so that you can sit anywhere and remote into both servers at the same time and do anything you need to do. So whether or not you're using a remote tool like LogMeIn or whatever, you're still going to be able to be in that office and RDP into both of those machines at the same time. So you can do anything you need to do. And you don't have to have 2 sets of keyboards and blah, blah, blah. Okay? So when you set up the company shares, what you're going to do is set them up like they were on the old system, so that all that has to happen is at some point the logon script, instead of going to whack whack old server, it goes to whack whack new server, right? And but the X drive is the X drive, and the H drive is the H drive, and everything just continues to work. So here's a checkpoint. Right now, we've got the new server is on 2012. It's on the domain. It has the roles enabled, right? And it's so right there in the middle. So next, we're going to move over some data. So we set up a robocopy, and how many of you have used robocopy? All right, lots of hands. How many have used lots of robocopy recently? Okay, good. Robocopy is the coolest, most robust tool. It's been around forever. I think the first time I saw it was in the first resource kit to NT 3.5. And I used that forever, just like copying it to the new machine. It's now built in. It's been built into Windows for a couple generations, and it's at the server, at the command line. It's just there. And it's got all of these cool switches. Please write this down quickly because I'm going to the next slide. No, I'm kidding. So if you put in the right switches, it monitors how many files have changed on the source and what's going on the target, and it counts up. And you can say, when it gets to 55 files, go ahead and do a fix-up. Right? When it's been 15 minutes, go ahead and move the files. And what happens is this allows you to have people on both the old and the new system at the same time. Again, slow down, keep it straight in your head. Client A or user A is on the old system. They open up Excel, they change some stuff, they save it. Every 15 minutes or less, it gets copied over to the new system. User B is on the new system. They've been migrated already, so they're on the new system. They do something and it stays where it's supposed to stay. If they need something that has changed this morning, they got to kind of coordinate with the other people. But if most people only work on the things that they really need in the morning, when they get moved to the new system, they can either wait 15 minutes and everything they did that morning is moved over, or they can say, hey, will you please go push the button, and you go hit enter, and it copies it over, right? You could start with the copy a month before you need this. And all you're doing is you're just creating a copy of their data on the new system. So when the day comes to do the actual switchover, there's almost nothing that needs to be moved. And if the office is small enough, you can say, here's what happens. Everybody go home at lunch, right? We're going to make the switch. All of the data has been updated before we did it. Now we turn off the old server, at least turn off the shares. You can't get to the old stuff. You can't be confused. You can't be running two systems at the same time. When you come back from lunch, the H drive is the H drive, the I drive is the I drive. You don't know the difference because everything is exactly the way you left it before you went to lunch. Mark?
Do you leverage a hypervisor even for your smallest clients so that you can do these migrations like with just a VHD boot?
You could, the question is, do we use hypervisor and virtualize this? You could do it for many clients. You can literally take their old box, put it into a virtual machine, move over everything you need to the new machine, and all you need to change at that point on the new machine is go to the live one instead of the virtual and move over whatever's changed. And that can be done real quickly in many cases and during the golden hours before work, after work, and at lunch. So it's a very easy way to do it. So when the syncing is complete, you edit the logon scripts on the domain controller so it points to the new share on the new server. And you use the same drive letters. So if they use that drive letter instead of a UNC, then it's all going to work. If something uses a true UNC, which was invented and nobody found out about it, so hardly anybody uses it, then you got to go change that stuff. When people log off and log back on, they should be on the new system. If not, reboot their system, and then they'll be on the new system. And it's very straightforward.
More question, Carl?
Yeah.
You're talking login scripts. Is there a reason that you don't move more towards existing tools and Active Directory?
So, yeah, you could be doing it with Active Directory and group policies, but a lot of stuff in 2003 was all logon scripts. So it depends. There's a huge installed base there that is 2003. So that's just the only reason we use that terminology. When you move line of business apps, that's a different story. Again, assuming that you've done everything up to this point, you can wait a month in the state you're in. You can have all the people being authenticated on the old server, but all the data's on the new server. Who cares? Client certainly doesn't know the difference, right? If you ask the client what they prefer, they'd be like, yeah, la, 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 right? Don't know, don't understand what you're talking about. Their eyes glaze over. This is your job. You get to make the decisions. Don't let the client tell you when you're going to do what. Line of business apps, if they're big and complicated and they have a database, right? Not simple stuff, but complicated stuff, you might be in a situation where you're moving from a 32-bit 2003 environment that you cannot install the newer version of the software onto it because it's 2003, it's not supported in 32-bit. And the new one, the old version of the software won't run on 2012. Right? So, and it's 64-bit, and it's like, okay. So you have to figure out what your process is. Again, you have to be very slow. You have to figure out how does that vendor want you to move this data, what the process is, whether you create a virtual environment or you do it in the background where nobody can see it. You basically have to go through that process. What you do is you take static data from last night's backup, and you're going to migrate that to the new system. You've totally nailed the process, whatever it is, in terms of getting that upgrade done and moving it over and changing the data and importing it in the new system. You do all that in a non-live environment so that on the day that you make the big switch, everything is done, you've nailed the process, you've documented it, and you know the phone number of the only person that seems to be able to help anybody at that line of business vendor, right? And he's not on vacation. Because if he's on vacation, you just wait another month and do it again, right? But once you've nailed that process, the only thing you need to do is that tiny bit of forklifting the data so that nobody's using both systems at the same time, right? There's 7 ways that you migrate data. I'm not going to go into them today, but one of them is the big switch. And that has to happen with line of business applications like that. So when you do the big switch, then everybody's on the new line of business app. And you could, if you need to, have a handful of people that, they're on the new system, but the line of business app hasn't been moved yet. They can RDP into their old system. They can use a terminal server session. They can have, a lot of these systems are in the cloud now, so they can be using one thing locally, but in the afternoon, they're going to use it in the cloud until you get to their desktop. There's a lot of ways you can do it. The key thing is, again, slow down, have a plan, be rigorous about how you follow it. if you are going to put stuff, you turn things off and send people home, it allows you to be very sloppy in your head because you know that you're just going to brute force through until 8 o'clock Monday morning. You don't have to work that way. Plan it out. Relax. If you do this right, it cannot possibly fail. And the reason it cannot possibly fail is you're going to nail the process in the background in this test environment before you go live. And then when it's time to go live, you've got the new system installed on the new machine. It's all there. It's running perfectly on the data from the day that you brought it from the backup. And all you have to do now is bring in the live data, right? And if it doesn't work, you haven't done anything to destroy the old system. Again, you can always go back. You're never destructive to the old system. If something goes wrong, you say, stop, we have to replan this. We got to get the only guy who can help us at the line of business app, and we'll wait a month. Again, time is not relevant to this process. Stages are the only thing that's relevant. Did you have a question?
So this doesn't actually apply to an SBS to SBS in-place migration?
This is not specific to SBS. This is specific to computer, right? So, but kind of the worst case scenario is you're going from this 32-bit where you can't install the new stuff to a 64-bit where it can't install the old stuff. I mean, that's kind of your worst case scenario, which is whatever, Chapter 7. Yes?
Do you ever find it time effective to put these in a virtual environment and try the migration first?
So nowadays we do it we do practice it in a virtual environment, but we didn't always. I mean, the biggest migration that our company has ever done was a system that had 3 different servers that ran 5 different line of business apps, and it was a medical imaging office with 5, I think it's 5, right, Mike? 5 heart surgeons. Their downtime is more expensive than everything I do in my company in a month, right? So no, there will be no downtime. So we built these systems at our office, connected them through VPN to the client's office. And when it was time to test the line of business app, we literally said, I need you to unplug that one imaging chair and point it to this system so that we can prove that we can get that image into this. And what I've then done is because I'm using the IP addresses from their network on that system, even though it's sitting at my office, it's perfectly set up so that I don't have to do anything when I'm done with the test. I point the chair back to what it's doing now, but when I move that server in-house, it's got the right IP address, it's all set up, I point the chair to it, it just works, right? Again, all the time you need. That migration cost the client, between hardware, software, and labor, just about $100,000, and it took 4 months. And they had 0 downtime across all of their systems and 5 line of business applications. It's not impossible. I'm not telling you it's easy, but you just have to go slow and be rigorous, right? And very few of us have clients with that kind of money in their SBS systems, but we really have been pushing this for so long. The guy's got like 14 logons. Why does he need to buy standalone server, right? SBS was doing everything he needed to do. Luckily for us, he's going to have to move off of that and onto standalone servers. So we get to do it all over again. So, because we actually made money on that $100,000 project, just so you know. So now, checkpoint. So now the new server, you got the data all moved over, right? You're repointing the shares. All we need to do is the last step. So here you're going to run AD prep on the old server. First thing you're going to do Monday morning is you're going to rummage around in your office and you're going to find a Server 2008 disk, and you're going to copy the Active Directory subdirectory from the support folder, and you're going to never lose that because you will need it to make your business successful in the next 3 years, because AD Prep 32 is not shipping on Server 2012. So if you need to run it on the 32-bit 2003 server, you need to have it, and you need to not lose it. So keep track of that little tool, okay? So this says AD Prep if you're on 2008 or 2011, but if it's 2003, you're going to run AD Prep 32, okay? But same commands. Basically, you prep the machine to move up, and what you're doing on the old server is you're expanding the schema so that it's compliant with what it needs to be for the new server. so that when it moves over, everything lines up the way it's supposed to be. Because obviously the world changed between 2003 to 2008 and 2008 to 2011 and so forth. So you just got to bring it up to spec. You prepped the domain and the groups, and now you're ready to pull the big switch. And again, download these slides. This is here step by step. Then you log into the new server, and you click the DNS, and you verify that it's set to look to itself for DNS. Right? Absolutely, again, if you don't absolutely command DNS, go train yourself, put your people through it. It's the most important skill you need in the next 3 years is DNS. If you can do DNS, you can solve almost all the problems you come up with. Click on the roles, and you add the role of the Active Directory domain services. And then you got to reboot it. This is your new server. And then you go ahead and do the DC promo. And now it becomes something that can be not only on the new domain, but it's a domain controller. And you just follow the prompts through. When it asks for system compatibility, you tell it, what you're promoting to or from. And when it says you want to create a domain or join one, you say, obviously, you're going to join one. And you bring it over. You're going to get an error that you're like, what? It's telling me I got a problem with DNS, or I got a problem with IPs. Ignore it, because what's really going on is it wants to do IP4 and IP6. If you've never done IP6, just totally ignore that error. There's nothing that tells you it has anything to do with IP6. You just have faith that you can ignore that error. But we're not doing anything destructive. You can always go backwards, right? So, if in fact it's an error other than that, and you shouldn't have ignored it, it still doesn't put you out of business. Accept the default directories, so forth and so on. The domain controller promotion may take some time. Just wait for it. It's going to happen. And when it's complete, you reboot the server again. Now it's a domain controller, but it doesn't have the FSMO roles. Right? So there's these certain things that even though Microsoft says we're not going to use the terminology anymore, that there's a primary domain controller and a secondary domain controller. They're all just domain controllers, except for the fact that this one's really primary, right? But we're not going to call it that anymore. So basically there's a process here where you go to FSMO maintenance, and you're going to move over those roles, and then you're going to make it the catalog server so that it becomes the one true master of the universe. And the SBS server, which no longer is serving up Exchange or SharePoint or SQL or databases or data or anything. All it's doing at this point is logons, right? That's what's happened, is that SBS servers had all of those services closed off one at a time. So then you go, and you transfer all of these domain master roles get moved over, and eventually, when you're done with that, down at the bottom, it says, right, you're going to promote it to be the new global catalog server. Right? Tick, 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 tick. Again, reboot, reboot, reboot. Again, each of these can be done separately. If you can't get this thing rebooted 4 times in an hour, okay, do it 2 times before work, and 2 times at lunch, and 2 times at the end of the day. None of this is destructive for the ability of you to also log on to the old machine. Because what's happening on the old machine is, yeah, you know what? It doesn't have the FSMO roles, but it can authenticate logons. It's still a domain controller. So DHCP is served off of the firewall, so no matter what you're doing with all of these reboots, you're not interrupting anything. You edit DHC to point to the new server for DNS. Okay? The new server, remember, a few steps back, it was pointing to itself for DNS. It was forwarding from there. So now the new server controls the universe. It's got the Active Directory. It knows where all the machines are and all the resources are in the domain, and it is the primary DNS server. Then you connect to the firewall, and with the first step, this is one of these things I just can't believe people don't do this, but it's part of documentation and going slow. First thing you do when you log into any firewall, no matter what you're doing, even if you're just looking around, is you back up that configuration. Right? Because you can be in the middle of something and it goes wrong and oh crap. Right? So back it up, and then you make the changes you need to make, and then the last thing you do is you back it up again. So you literally, every time you log into a firewall, you back up the firewall system before you get in and the last thing before you get out. And so in the middle, you make the changes. But again, now you can go back. If anything needs to be reversed, you just take a step back and it's not destructive. So now the new server is the primary domain controller. It's the global catalog server. It has the FSMO roles and it's serving up DNS on the network. So the only thing you need to do is remove the old SBS machine from the domain controller role, turn it off, and stick it away. And if you don't remove it if you don't go to that machine and remove it as a DNS controller there, I mean as a domain controller, it's okay. You can just shut it off. And that way someday if you need to, you can turn it back on and you can put it back where it was. Because on the new machine, you're always going to be able to go in and clean up Active Directory and get rid of that old machine if you choose to. So I got a few resources here. Literally, you guys get these slides because these are the places to get started. First of all, the TechNet library for Server 2012 is gargantuan. It's unbelievable how much stuff is there. Once you get in, you see the sign over here. Here's 2012 and Essentials and so forth. Once you open that up, it's just more and more and more subdirectories. Try not to take a picture. You can download these, I promise. And then here's the Server 2012 versions and the Foundation and Essentials we talked about. You can download Server 2012 on a VHD. One of the coolest things Microsoft is doing is they're making these things available on VHDs in various stages. And one of the cool things you can do, which Mark asked about using virtual machines. I have the Server 2012 Essentials, after the basic install, wrap it in plastic and stick it over there. And then I make it a domain controller and I wrap it in plastic and stick it over there. And then, I go step, 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 step. I have all of these virtual machines for every stage of the process so that when I'm trying to figure something out, because I've migrated this like 42 times in the last, couple of days, because I got to make sure that I know all the processes and I'm using the code that was released and not the code from a month ago, right? So once you put it in a virtual environment, it just goes, right? And you can just redo the same thing again and again and again and figure out exactly what you want to do. So you can document that process in the virtual environment before you take it to your clients and make it happen in the so-called real world. Then there are these virtual labs. Look at these. These are some of the virtual labs. I didn't list them all, but if you go to that URL, you can download these, and they are like 90-minute labs on how to do everything you need to do with the new 2012 environment. And it's stuff that's related to what you're doing. Like, okay, so how is IIS 8 different than anything else, right? How do we use Hyper-V to work with SMB storage, blah, 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 right? It's all right there. Stuff on FSMO roles, stuff on migration from Microsoft, the robocopy this is all the robocopy things that you need to know. And if you are interested in this, just, if you have any questions or whatever, you can send me an email. If you want to look at how some of the things that we look at when we want to move a client to the cloud, just send an email to cloud@smallbizthoughts.com and it'll auto-respond back with a document that you can go through and just kind of a starting place of evaluating your clients in terms of storage and bandwidth and what kind of things are on the network and just some things to consider if you're going to move some of the things like Exchange and SharePoint into the cloud. What does that look like? So if you're online now, you can do it right now and just cloud@smallbizthoughts.com. With that, I think we have time for half a question. Yes, sir.
So this process basically has local file storage. At the beginning, you made a comment that your file storage is in the cloud and your...
So this process is that we went into detail on has local file storage because this was on how do you move from the SBS environment into a standalone 2012 server. So this assumes that you've got local storage of that data and that you've either moved Exchange to the cloud or you've moved it to a different server before this. So this is the piece of like, how do I move from this box to multiple boxes? So this gets, obviously I can't cover everything in an hour, but this gets you the other standalone Server 2012 domain controller in place of the SBS controller. So you might have Exchange in the cloud, you might have SharePoint in the cloud, or you might have them just on a different server. Yes, sir.
Any concerns about legacy Active Directory objects, group policy,
So
things like that?
the big question is always, are there concerns about all the legacy Active Directory and so forth? Yeah, there's some of that, and one of the problems with migrating Active Directory is always that you go into these environments, especially an environment that you haven't controlled, and it can be a snake pit. If you have a really small client, hey, what the heck? Install the new machine, create 5 new logons, go ahead and do the migration process of profiles that we've always done, and just recreate it. But if you got 50 users, you might not want to do that. And so there are things, Jeff Middleton's in the back, he'd be happy to sell you a tool, show you how to clean up that Active Directory. There are many things that you can do. My worst case scenario was a client who, they hired somebody who said, hey, you know what, I found this wizard on the internet, and even though we've got an absolutely brand new server, I'm going to run this thing and it's going to make group policies make my life easy. That guy screwed that machine up in 7 ways to Sunday, and until we just replaced that machine, it was always messed up. It was like we couldn't find all the crap he broke. Hofer?
If I understand correctly, if you remove DHCP role from SBS 2008 or 2011 to go to a standard, that RWW breaks?
The question is, if you remove DHCP from 2008 or 2011, does RWW break? I have never seen that happen, and in 2011, I don't think it sets it up by default on the server. I think by default, it sets it up on the firewall. That has been Microsoft's process for years. So
I needed DHCP to be on the server for certain things to work properly, especially remote access.
So there have been things where you've needed DHCP on the server. Again, I've never seen it. I have never seen it break remote access because the IP address came from someplace else. You need a DHCP on the server to hand out IPs for people who are coming in remotely. It doesn't have to be the only DHCP authenticated on that network. The desktops are getting their IPs from the firewall, not necessarily the people who are remoting in. It's more of an issue with VPN than it is with remote access. But again, do you want your VPN to be on the server versus the firewall? But it is a question. I've not seen it break, but I understand the concern. And I also know that hardcore, Microsoft's advice since 2011 has been that it goes on the firewall and not on the server. And in fact, like I say, Essentials, if you've got plug and play enabled, it will configure that firewall to hand out DHCP, even though it's doing remote access, and you could do VPN if you wanted. So, because when you set up the remote access scope or the VPN scope, it will hand out addresses. It has to have that DHCP enabled for that process, but not for the rest of the logons. Does that make sense? Because it knows you're coming in remotely. Other questions? No questions? Does that mean that this was worthless?
No, it was great.
Oh! Thank you. I don't usually have to solicit applause, so I appreciate that.
That came from the heart.
Okay, good. And I still owe you that beer. No other questions? Oh, yes, sir.
Just a statement about virtualization and playing with this. In the back, you have the virtual evangelist there, Mark. One of the things that I've developed over time is an appreciation for the tremendous reboot times, fast reboots.
Yes.
Virtualized. We see SBS reboot in 2 to 4 minutes, depending on whether it's SSD or magnetic drives. And you can fill that 2 to 4 minutes with a brief discussion with somebody, and they didn't even notice the server.
Yeah, so he's saying that if you're in a virtual environment, the reboots are super fast, right? If you're talking about one of these 2003 servers, it could easily have, limit of 3.5 gigs of RAM and slow processor and take 45 minutes to reboot. But if it's in a virtual environment, it goes down and up pretty fast. And Mike has been experimenting with putting our new clients on solid-state drives. And even in the real environment, man, those things reboot fast. So, I mean, it's one of the cool things, especially, to be honest, if you're documenting your process and you got a virtualization of your old server and the virtualization of your new server, and you're testing it, the reboot is boom, 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 because it's like off, on, and it's a 1 or 2 minute process.
You had tantalized us last Thursday saying that you have a method of migrating from SBS to SBS with both of them up and running the whole time and happy.
So the question is, I have this process of moving from one SBS to another SBS with them both running at the same time. Yes, I have a book this thick on that. I'd be happy to chat with you about that. Basically, it is an elaboration of what went through here with a strictly SBS environment, but again, you divide and conquer. You treat everything separately. You can have them up at the same time. Again, the key thing that Microsoft warns you about, oh, you can't have two of them up at the same time. Well, that's only true if they know that the other one is there. So DNS makes your life easy. You can keep those two machines from seeing each other. You can migrate the data and leave that machine up there for a month. You can actually leave the old machine up after the new machine is online for the rest of history. As long as they don't find this one indicator that the other SBS machine is there, they won't see it and they won't shut each other off. They won't have an election and nobody will lose. So, which is not true of the United States. Other questions? All righty. If you haven't signed up for the Pocket MBA program, please go straight to Harry and ask to do that. In the meantime, please fill out your evaluation forms. What's the highest? Is it a 10?
Excellent.
Excellent. Please put excellence on everything. Strongly agree to everything. One of my favorite things that happened a few years ago, I used to call our local phone company, Pac Bell, and they would answer the phone and say, they literally, how may I provide you with excellent service? And I thought, wow, man, they have set the bar like up here, right? How can I provide you with excellent service? That's awesome. So now I have very high expectations. And then a couple years later, I call one day, and the woman says, how may I provide you with very excellent service? I'm like, what? What? What does that mean? And she says, well, I said, because you used to say this other thing. She said, well, what we found out is when they evaluate us, right, they didn't ask, were you provided with excellent service? It was good, better, best, blah, blah, blah. And they were like echoing to me exactly what they wanted me to put on that form. And so they no longer promised the same thing. And I'm like, oh, that kind of sucks, So I want to go back to the way it was. Maybe what they need to do is change their evaluation forms. So, because I like the old promise. All righty. Thank you very much. Am I done? Is that what you're telling me? She says, go home. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Then they went to AT&T and the service went in the tank.
Yeah, then they went to AT&T and it's like...